Okay, so basically now we're going to do the circulatory system. So basically this goes for both the CSEC HSB as well as the CSEC biology. So if you're doing either CSEC HSB or you're doing either CSEC biology, it does apply, right? It's the same thing. It is literally the same thing. So basically that is what we're going to get into. And basically when we talk about the circulatory system from the get-go, basically what it's saying is we're trying to we know that organs make up systems, right? So the order is that cells make up tissues, tissues make up organs, and then organs make up systems. So that's why we're talking about the circulatory system. So we're talking about how blood gets around the body, how it gets oxygenated, and basically how that entire gas exchange process takes place to keep to basically keep the blood having oxygen in it. So that's what we mean by circulatory system. So yes, and we're going to be talking a lot about the heart and all those things. So yeah, so the topics that we're going to go into are basically why do we need a circulatory system. That's one. The materials that are transported around the body. Then we're going to be talking about the components of the blood. Then we're going to be looking at the structure of the heart, like the design or the outline, the structure of the heart basically. Then we're going to be talking about blood vessels such as arteries, veins, capillaries, and basically the role that they play in all of this. And then we're going to actually discuss exactly how double circulation takes place and basically why it takes place in our body. So basically in humans we have double circulation. So basically what that means is that the blood passes through the heart twice. So obviously deoxygenated blood, and then we're going to have oxygenated blood, right? And then we're going to look at blood pressure, meaning systole and diastole. So that's basically the plan with the things that we are going to get into. Okay, so the first question that we're going to answer is why do we need a circulatory system, right? So why you think we need a circulatory system? Why we never just alive and just there? Like if we compare something like maybe a flatworm or something really small, those organisms that are really small, they don't really have circulatory systems because they don't need it, right? They don't need it. They're small enough. The surface area to volume ratio, it's good enough. They have enough surface area to diffuse and do everything that they need to, right, in those small organisms. But in human beings, we are big, right? We are big. Like literally, we have so many systems going on in the body. We have, obviously the circulatory system, excretory system, respiratory system, reproductive system. We have a lot of systems. We have a lot of things going on, and basically, when we're talking about the circulatory system, we have to talk about the heart, right? So the heart is literally what pumps blood all over the body, right? The main function of the heart pumps blood all over the body, right? So every other organ needs blood. So that heart, right? If we lose our heart, basically you're dead. You're dead. If you don't have a heart, you die, right? For example, and if we look at another system, like for example, maybe the reproductive system, let's just say a woman takes out her uterus, she can still live afterwards, right? But with the circulatory system and with the heart, there is no living. The two biggest organs, yes, if you lose your brain and if you lose your heart, you're done for. There's no going back after those two have been damaged. And obviously some people can get the thing put in them chest. I don't remember what it called right now with the heart, the metal heart. I don't remember what it be, but basically I don't remember right now, but yeah. So it's very essential now. It literally now the circulatory system, it literally delivers essential oxygen and nutrients to cells throughout the body while removing waste products like carbon dioxide. Now we know that oxygen, we as human beings, we inhale oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide, right? So every single time we inhale that oxygen, every single organ in our body needs that oxygen, right? We need the oxygen in our blood because the blood is obviously what circulates, right? The blood is what circulates throughout our entire body, right? And we need that, we need to keep that oxygenated, right? So every single time we exhale, we're removing the waste and we're getting the carbon dioxide out of the body, right? So with the circulatory system, as I said before, this is why we need it, right? One, we're just too big as organisms. We're big. Like the surface area to volume thing would work out at all. The surface area is way too big. There's no way to just diffuse out carbon dioxide out our body and just, there's no way to do that, right? So that is why the circulatory system is so important. That is why the heart is so important, because it is what drives this entire circulation process. Both the heart, the blood, and obviously carbon dioxide and oxygen. Those are the two main gases, right? So now some different materials that we transport around the body. Obviously oxygen and carbon dioxide, the two main gases that we just talked about. Hormones, so basically we're not talking about the endocrine system right now, but we know that with nervous system they use nerve impulses. With the endocrine system they use hormones in order to get things around the body, and hormones work through the bloodstream, right? So you can just see how the circulatory system is just so important and how it kind of overlaps with other systems, because other systems also depend on the circulatory system in order to work, right? And if we're talking about circulation, as I said before, blood. The blood is the driving force behind the circulation. It is literally what circulates throughout the entire body, right? And when we talk about blood, we're obviously going to look at the components, and we're also going to look at blood vessels, because the vessels, those are like the containers, those are the tubes that the blood is going to travel through in order to distribute slash circulate throughout the entire body, right? So let's talk about the components of blood, and it's very important that if you do the circulatory system, you need to know the components of blood, right? So basically, what we have going on is the plasmid, right? So the plasmid is basically at the liquid part of the blood. It makes up about 55% of its volume. It is mainly water and contains various dissolved substances like proteins, salts, glucose, hormones, and waste products, right? But the main thing that you should never forget about the plasma is that it is the liquid part of the blood, right? The liquid part is like make up 55% of its volume, right? So if you ever like bleed, maybe you cut your finger or something and you see the blood, so the liquid part, the liquid aspect is its plasma, right? Now red blood cells, and obviously they contain hemoglobin, right? And we know that when we hear hemoglobin, we know that hemoglobin and red, I don't know, but me personally correlate, whenever I hear hemoglobin, I correlate it to red, right? So the reason why the red blood cells, and the red blood cells are the next component of the blood. So these red blood cells, right, that contain hemoglobin, and that hemoglobin gives the red blood cells its color, right? So that is why blood is red, because hemoglobin inside. And the next very important thing about red blood cells, right, is that they carry oxygen. So literally, if you ever hear like them say some people anemic or them have low blood count and stuff like that, but basically it's very important that we maintain a healthy level of red blood cells, right? Because they are literally the oxygen carrying cells within our bodies, right? So they carry oxygen from the lungs to different tissues all over the body, so they are extremely important, right? So hemoglobin, so what you need to take away from red blood cells is that they carry oxygen, they're made up of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin gives it its red color, right? So basically plasma is in the blood, red blood cell, they're all these four, they are all inside of the blood. So when you bleed and you just see it like that, your naked eye can't really see much, right? But put it under a microscope and these four main components of blood will be literally seen, so you'll be able to see everything. Now this word right here, eh, I can't even pronounce it myself, but erythrocytes, this basically is the same thing as red blood cells. It's just another word for red blood cells, or the more technical name for red blood cells. But just remember that plasma, liquid part of the blood, red blood cells carries oxygen, right? It carries oxygen and it contains hemoglobin. So just remember those main things about these two. So now white blood cells. So the main thing that you need to remember about white blood cells is that they fight infection and they fight diseases, right? So for example, if you get a cut, right? If you get a cut, these white blood cells are literally what would rush to the area, right? So basically, if, as we said before, we get a cut, white blood cells literally what fight infection and diseases. So they try their best to prevent you from getting sick. They are part of the immune system, right? And them being a part of the immune system, that is their role. Infection, fighting infection, right? So as you can see, within every single cell, so the four cells that we're talking about, right? And this is the third one, right? Blood cell. You can realize that each of them, each component of the blood carries out a separate role. Like they're not overlapping in function, and you understand exactly why we need the plasma, why we need a red blood cell, and now you're seeing why we need white blood cells, right? And just to make it clear, white blood cells don't actually white. And they don't actually like just white. If you look at it under the microscope, it's not going to be white. You understand? But I don't know why they call it that, but it's white blood cells, right? So the last one we're going to look at is platelets. So basically, the main thing about platelets is that they function for blood clotting. So they clot blood, right? So helping to stop bleeding when a blood vessel is damaged. So as I said before, if you get a cut or anything like that, this is what helps the blood to clot. You understand? It helps the blood to clot up together to stop bleeding. So as you look at them, you just need to know the function and know that these are the components of the blood. You might see it on the MCQ, or you might even see it on the paper too in a free response. So infection, white blood cells, and then blood clotting, platelets, right? And the thing about it, so the leukocytes thing, you don't have to really worry about that, but leukocytes is another name for white blood cells, and thrombocytes and then is another name for platelets, right? So it's the same thing. Then now, in order for the blood to circulate all over the body, we have different blood vessels, right? So we have different blood vessels, and they are arteries, veins, and capillaries, right? So in their structures, they are very different, very different, right? And there's a photo right here comparing the three of them. So we can see an artery, we can see the vein, and then the capillary. So usually the artery is the biggest one, right? It's the biggest one, right? So the arteries, they carry oxygenated blood from the heart to the rest of the body, right? So just remember this: arteries carry oxygenated blood from the heart to the tissues and organs of the body. So it means that they carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. So away from the heart. Now, it's saying here that they have thick elastic walls to withstand high pressure of blood pumped from the arteries, right? So the high pressure of blood pumped from the arteries, right? And they also branch into smaller vessels called arterioles, which are needed the capillaries. Then you have like venules and then the vein, but you don't have to necessarily worry about all of that. But that's just how it travels. You have the artery, which is the biggest, and you have arterioles, which are going to be smaller vessels, and you got the capillaries in the middle. Now you're gonna have the venules and then the vein. So as I said before, the arteries are usually the biggest blood vessel. Let's just say that, right? Now, one of the most noticeable things about the artery is the size of the lumen. So this is actually very important. So the size of the lumen, you can see that the lumen is quite small. So we're saying that the arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart to the rest of the body, and it has a small lumen. It has a small lumen because, and basically lumen is like a little hollow space, you know, the space, right? So, and that's the space where the blood will travel through. So now it has a small lumen because of the high pressure of the blood that's being pumped from the heart, right? And you know, so the more narrow something is, the faster the pressure will go, right? So it's like if you have a pipe, right? And if you have a small pipe or maybe a straw, we can probably use an example with a straw. Let's just use the example. For example, you take a straw and we're going to say that we're going to throw some water in the straw, right? And we're going to say that basically we go through the water in the straw, and the thinner the straw, or the mager or the skinnier, the narrower the straw is, the water will come out quickly. Now if we use a big broad straw, it just kind of, it basically has lower pressure. That is what me try to say. The bigger it is, the lower the pressure, and then the more narrow or smaller the lumen is the faster the pressure. So the blood is moving fast. So it's narrow and the blood does not move fast. So it'll leave the heart and it'll go to the rest of the tissues and organs of the bodies. Because remember we said that all the organs them, all the other systems them, all our tissues that depend upon this oxygenated blood, because the blood is what circulates all throughout the body, right? So the blood circulates to the reproductive system, all the endocrine system relies on the blood as well. So as you can see, it all over the place, right? So that's basically why the lumen is so small in the arteries, because it is carrying higher pressure of blood that is being pumped from the heart. Now we're going to take a look at the vein, because that's important too. So in the veins now, they're bringing deoxygenated blood. So remember that arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart, and in veins are going to bring deoxygenated blood to the heart, back to the heart, right? So now the same thing that we were saying is that, as you can see before, as you can see here, that the walls are much thinner in the veins and the arteries, right? And they have valves. So now valves in our veins are basically, they're very common, and they serve a very key essential function, right? To prevent the backflow of blood, right? So we say veins are carrying a deoxygenated blood to the heart, right? And then though these veins have valves to prevent the backflow of blood, because we don't want the deoxygenated blood out, as to go where it's not supposed to. So now, as you can see now, the vein has an extremely large lumen. Why you think the vein have thinner walls, and why you think the vein has such a big lumen? The same thing that I said before, that when the more narrow something is, the faster the pressure of the blood. Now we have a big vein, we have a big lumen, we have a big space in the middle, so it means that the pressure is much lower, right? The pressure is much lower. So basically the blood is now moving back to the heart. So imagine that, remember I said the heart pump blood, So for the arteries, them are easy something. The arteries can just take with the blood quick and fast, right? That is why they have so narrow lumens. Now in the vein, this blood is going back to the heart, right? It's going back to the heart. So you cannot have the blood just rushing pan the heart just like that. Remember I said the heart is an organ, remember? So when the blood was leaving, it was fine. You can have the pressure of the blood go as fast as you want it to go, because it go to the organs, it go to the tissues in the body. But when it comes to the heart is just a small little structure. You cannot just have blood rushing upon the heart like that. And that is why we have such a big lumen. We have a larger lumen. And this lumen facilitates like the slower pressure of blood towards the heart. So a much lower pressure of blood towards the heart, just to avoid any complications or anything like that, because you cannot just have blood rushing in upon the heart if you get damage, like, you understand? So just keep that in mind. And in our capillary, which is, you can see there, it also has a small lumen, but basically the key thing is that the capillary, they are only one cell thick. If you compare the artery, the capillary, and the vein, it is the only one that has one cell thick. Just look on it, only one cell thick. And the reason why it's only one cell thick is because it functions in the role of gas exchange, right? So this is the key gas exchange blood vessel, the capillary. So it is literally the middleman between the artery and the vein. This is literally, so the artery I bring blood away from the heart, and the vein I bring blood to the heart. But the capillary is literally that middle ground between the artery and the vein, where the gas exchange is going to actually happen, where they're going to remove carbon dioxide, which is a waste, and then take in oxygen and nutrients that we actually need and then that is what's going to get circulated around the body and all that stuff, right? So it's one cell thick, and just know that its primary function is for gas exchange. So just remember that part. Yeah, so basically it's just surface area. So that's why it has such a small surface area, because it's one cell thick, and obviously the fusion works best through shorter distances, goes through thinner walls and stuff like that. So that is why it's like that. Alright, so this is just the diagram of the heart, showing the different parts of the heart, right? And we basically soon discuss what is happening with everything right here. But just to get an idea, just look at all the different parts. We have the superior vena cava, we have the right atrium. It would be good if I can draw this, right? Very good if I can draw this and just know the different parts on it. So you have the superior vena cava, you have the right atrium, the right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle, pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, the mitral valve, aorta valve, pulmonary valve, tricuspid valve, which prevents the backflow of blood. So all of these parts of the heart are very, very important, and we're going to talk about how all of this works in just a second. So we said before that we have, as humans, we have a double circulatory system, right? And we said that blood passes through the heart twice. That is what we said. Now, why is it so advantageous to have a double circulatory system? So, more oxygen and nutrient delivery, improve the gas exchange, and the ability to maintain higher metabolic rates. So, you see all that physical activity and run up and down business, it works out. And as I said before, because of the size of our bodies, we need this double circulatory system. The blood cannot pass through the heart once. It now goes to sustain the body. A lot goes on in the body. We have a lot of tissues, we have a lot of organs, we have a lot of systems going on. I'm going to tell you about the reproductive system, nervous system, endocrine system. A lot of things are depending on the circulatory system. We need the blood, we need the oxygen for flow in our body, right? So this is why the double circulatory system is necessary, and it's called that because it passes through the heart twice, right? So now just bear in mind that, and if you look at this diagram, just bear in mind that when the deoxygenated blood, right? The oxygenated blood, it gets oxygenated in the lungs, right? So from the lungs, that is where it gets the oxygen from. Just know that, right? So now, as relates to circulation, we're going to talk more about that. But basically, what's happening is we're going to focus on this diagram right here. And basically, the deoxygenated blood is going to return to the heart through the vena cava. So right here, this is the vena cava. So deoxygenated blood is coming in. It's going to the right atrium, then it's going to the right ventricle. So this tricuspid valve is just what prevents the backflow of blood. So it just prevents blood from going the wrong way. We don't want the blood going back out through the vena cava. We want it going in one direction, right? So it comes to the right ventricle, where it's pumped to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. So as you can see, this is the first lap of the blood, the circulation. I would say blood passes through the heart twice. So see there, this is where deoxygenated blood comes in, and then it's going to be pumped to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. Right, good. Then we're saying oxygenated blood is going to return through the pulmonary veins, right? So it's going to return to the pulmonary veins, go through the left atrium, and then go through the left ventricle, and then it's going to be going out through the aorta. So after the gas exchange takes place in the alveoli in the lungs, that oxygenated blood is going to come back, right? So when it comes back, it's going to enter through the pulmonary veins and then go to the left atrium, right? When it goes to the left atrium right here, it's going to enter the left ventricle, and then it's going to pump oxygenated blood into the aorta, and then the aorta to the rest of the body, right? So all these different organs and tissues that need this oxygenated blood is going to get it, and that is how we say that blood goes through the through goes through the heart twice, right? So this deoxygenated blood return to the heart with the vena cava, completing the systematic circuit, right? So as you can see, it's a cycle. So the pulmonary circulation, it starts out deoxygenated blood coming to the vena cava, right atrium, right ventricle, and then out through the pulmonary artery to the lungs, right? So that's what was happen. Obviously, in the lungs, you have tiny air sacs called alveoli, gas exchange take place. So then oxygenated blood comes back in through the pulmonary veins. So the pulmonary veins, they're bringing oxygenated blood, right, to the heart. In this case, remember, this is different from the regular vein. The regular vein, them, they bring deoxygenated blood to the heart. That's what the regular veins do. So just look at it like this. Regular veins would bring deoxygenated blood. Alright, so now with blood pressure, basically we know that blood pressure is hypertension, right? So basically we're going to be talking about basically how they measure blood pressure. So basically you have the systole value and you have the diastole value. So basically the systole is the phase of the cardiac cycle when the heart contracts and pumps blood out of the heart, right? So that is that aspect. Then the diastole is the phase of the cardiac cycle when the heart relaxes and refills with blood. So if you look at the diagram, the top number, the bigger number, is going to be the systolic number, right? Which basically tells when the heart contracts and pumps blood out of the heart. And then the diastole is when the muscles are basically more relaxed, right? So basically, pressure exerted when blood is injected into arteries when they're contracting. So basically, it's saying the normal value for an adult would be 120, and then for the diastole value, 80 would be the normal value, right? So that's basically what it means. Systole and the diastole, the big top number, systole, the bottom number is diastole, which is usually a smaller number, and 120 over 80 would be a regular blood pressure for a relatively healthy human being. So if you see the systole number is like 140, 150, then you say the person have high blood pressure. And yeah, so basically that's the circulatory system. Ensure that you know the parts of the heart and basically how blood goes in and how blood goes out.